twisted down. Talking about my generation. Just because we get around. Talking about my generation. Things they do look awful. Talking about my generation. I hope I die before I get old. Talking about my generation. This is my generation, baby. Why don't you all fade away? Don't try to dig what we all say. My generation.
They say I'll write disposable music. I say that I fight for my right to sing what I want. They'll try to finagle me, sound here or there, but I'd rather bleed. Voice you'll never hear, hide me away in your bedroom closet. Exploit our dreams, but don't forget money ain't what it seems. They say no talent there. Now you'll hear what they want you to hear. Pretty pop, finally too. Do you believe what they have in their sleeve?
Okay, hey folks, how are we doing today? Let's go ahead and get started here. We're going to start off with the Pledge of Allegiance. So if you will, please stand as we get started here. I pledge allegiance of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Michael. Good morning, everyone. Happy New Year. Welcome to our first chapter meeting of the year. My name is Mike Beckstrand. I'm your chapter president for this year. I'm with Cal OES, and I want to thank the Jelly Belly Factory for sponsoring us again this year. It's always a pleasure and a joy to come shopping. And what we'll do now is we'll go through introductions. I'll start the microphone here and just go around the room. If you are a commercial vendor, go ahead and give us a quick, brief introduction to your business and what you offer, and we'll go from there.
Good morning, Linda Biaggi, City of Stockton.
Yeah, good morning. Larry Smith, City of Stockton, Fire IT, and one of your board members.
Morning, Sean Allen, Stockton Fire.
Good morning, Christopher Sutter, Stockton Police.
Kent McNabb, Oakland Police.
Bernard Louie, Oakland Police.
Yeah, Michael Elder with Cal OES 911 branch.
Shelley McMahon, Cal OES 911 branch, and also one of your board of directors.
Samuel Christensen, Epic Marketing. We represent manufacturers across the radio frequency space. Ken Wood, E.F. Johnson, most notably recently Mindshare Dispatch Console. So really happy and optimistic about this new year, NAPCO.
Nicole Zanatelli, Brown Police Department Dispatch.
Bill Schmay with Tally. As most of you may know in this room, we're a distributor of wireless infrastructure and mobile products, nationwide distributor. Want to remind everybody that we are local as well. We've got a stocking facility up in Sacramento for you or your contractors that are doing projects. We keep local inventory here in Los Angeles. And then lastly, we made a recent acquisition of Connectronics, which is a wireless networking distributor of various licensed and unlicensed microwave and connectivity products. So we have access again to all those products should you need. Thank you.
You're Nicolescu, Motorola Solutions. So I actually live out of Redding, California, so I made that quick drive down this morning. As you guys know, Motorola is big on radio, but we're also big on a lot of other stuff. Body-worn cameras, DFR, the full ecosystem suite is what we're providing these days. So if anybody wants to chat, I'm here.
Good morning. I'm Iggy Brigado from JPS. We're an engineering house based out of Raleigh, North Carolina. We provide manufacturing and design of communication interoperability and communication distribution solutions, as well as probably one of the last conventional analog voters on the market. So got a lot of customers out here that I recognize. I've got my colleague on the other side of the room as well. So thank you for having me.
Kevin Persing, Googly Corporation. I'm going to be speaking in about 20 minutes, so I'll introduce myself then.
Good morning, Kathy Conley, Sutter Buttes Communications, two-way radio dealer of all major manufacturers, sales, service, rentals, installations.
Good morning, Greg Glenn, Comba, and also, what is now Trig Incorporated, which is the group from CSI Telecommunications. Craig Trigstadt, myself, and a few others, we're kind of changing the name up a little bit and getting a little bit more focused in that regard. And so you'll be hearing some more on that. On the Comba side, I'm the basically licensee liaison. I'm working between the FCC and the licensees to try to come up with good quality solutions for in-building distribution solutions.
Okay, Sherry Speakman, Solano County Sheriff's Dispatch Center.
Jennifer Gatile, Solano Dispatch.
Michael Proscia, San Francisco Senior Comm System Technician on the infrastructure side, and alternate frequency coordinator.
Zach Lopez, Solano Communications.
Zach Woodbridge, Solano Communications.
David Jones, E.F. Johnson, sister company to JVC Kenwood. I'm solutions engineer and your assistant commercial. Help me with that title, please. Anyway, on the board, CCAM.
Good morning, I'm Eric Stewart. I'm with American Power Systems. We do DC power solutions for the telecoms, utilities, data centers, and radio communications. So if you need any DC power solutions, come see me. Thank you.
Good morning, Roman Kokarts, Sacramento Regional Fire Communication Center.
Tara Poyer, Sacramento Regional Fire Dispatch.
Good morning, Mandy Montalvo, Public Safety Communications Manager for the Elk Grove Police Department and your chapter VP.
Good morning, I'm John Aurelius for the Public Safety Innovation. We're out of Sacramento, and we design, build, and maintain the mobile command centers and specialty vehicles, and we're also involved in radio programming and tuning.
Good morning, Mike McKenzie. That's where I retired from. River Delta Fire District.
Hello, Dan Marcus with RGB Spectrum. We're a command and control audiovisual technology provider, and we manufacture systems for dispatch, real-time, and other operation centers. Thank you.
Good morning, I'm Jessica Larmer from SHASCOM 911 up in Shasta County.
I'm Gary Mitchell, El Dorado County Communications.
Cassandra McCants-Deaver, CHP Telecommunications Section, and board member.
Kenneth Harris, California Highway Patrol.
Dina Casada, Roseville Police Department Communications.
Mike in Houston, Placer County Sheriff's Dispatch.
Wendy Mayovis, Placer County Sheriff Dispatch.
George with JPS. As Iggy was saying, we're an engineering house. We try to create solutions to close communications gaps that maybe purchasing another radio is too expensive to do. One of our greatest strengths is we have a very powerful gateway to provide push-to-talk over cellular solutions that really helps expand communications in your networks. Thank you.
Good morning, Larry Weber with the sales group. We're a manufacturer's rep that covers 13 western states, kind of a unique situation. We bring all kinds of really cool products to the dispatch center and now control rooms in general, real-time crime centers through RGB, who's one of our top lines, and glad to be here.
Good morning, my name's Barry Driver. Happy New Year, everybody. We made it to 2026. What I have in my hand is a set of magnets. So if you're a water district, if you're Motorola, and you're mounting an alternative method that doesn't require welding, gluing to a water tank, a water tower, this is your solution. So these are high strength magnets. Put your bracket on here, whatever it is. It could be a strut. Stick this on the side of that tank and you can just run conduit. For your DC guy over here, you can run conduit up and down the tank. You can run power, you can do whatever you need to do. So if you're interested, come check it out. Thank you.
Good morning, I'm Manny Vieira. I'm your commercial chair and also a member of the Commercial Advisory Council for National NAPCO.
Jim Lencioni, your chapter PIO, your executive council member, and also with Placer County Telecommunications.
Good morning, Carl Grover, City of Roseville, your chapter secretary and immediate past president.
Great, thank you. Just a reminder, we are live streaming our meeting today, so if you have questions or comments or anything during the presentations, be sure and grab a microphone so those online can hear us. I also want to let you know, yes, it is cold in here. It is not your imagination. Of it, and they are trying to solve that problem for us. We'll now move on to our Board of Directors meeting, committee reports. We have a few committees that have some information for you all to report out. So we will start first with awards and recognition. Anna?
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. I have a couple quick updates for you. Can I get them both while I'm here? Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna get them both while I'm here. First one is awards and recognition. It's an announcement of our 2026 awards banquet that will be held. We're going back to Oak Farms this year in Lodi on May 7th, and the nominations are open now. They close at the end of February, so if anyone has anything extraordinary that happened in their or around their areas that they would like to nominate someone for, we would love to see a great turnout like we had last year. My next committee report is for the conference committee. Just to save the date for everyone, this year's 2026 Cal APCO conference is October 18th to 21st at Town and Country in San Diego, and the call for papers are open now. You can find more information at calapco.org and get all the good details from there.
Yeah. Yep, thank you. Manny, commercial activities. You're walking around with your own microphone.
Wait till they turn. Good morning. All my monthly meetings for our sponsors has been filled. I'm looking for backups. If anybody would like to give me their name and number, I'll keep you in mind just in case we have somebody that has to cancel. I'd like to talk about the banquet. We are looking for sponsors for the banquet. We already have a couple that have signed up, but if you're interested in being one of our sponsors, please let me know. I'll be sending out a form to you hopefully this week, so that's would be great. We'd like to make our sponsors be able to give an award out to the people that deserve it. Let's see what else I guess that's it for me. If anybody's interested in joining the CAC, which is the Commercial Advisory Council for National APCO, as a commercial member, please let me know. Also, I'm terming out this year after 8 years, so it would be nice to have somebody in the West representing us. I think that's like it.
No, I don't think so. Thank you, Manny. Next report, our finances. Turn it over to Carl. As soon as he's done there in the back.
All right, so first committee report, finance and budget. Our balance as of December 31st was $159,308.99. We do have about $30,000 worth of checks that still need to clear from the 2025 conference. So our actual balance is more like $130,000. And then the membership and nominations committee new member report. We have 10 new members ranging from Googly Corporation to Oracle to San Francisco BART, Santa Clara County 911 Communications, Santa Clara PD, and Visalia PD. Our current total membership as of January 6th is 687 members, down a bit from our high water mark of 850 last year. but that's to be expected as the new year rolls over. So if you have not renewed your membership yet, please go ahead and do so. Any questions on finance or membership? All right, thank you.
Thank you, Carl. Mandy, Legislative Committee.
Good morning, everybody. Happy New Year. A couple of updates from the legislative side of things. We will start talking about more and more 911 goes to Sacramento. That should be in probably early May. So as we get more dates solidified, we'll tell you about those. But a couple of the bills that we were talking with legislators about last year at 911 goes to Sacramento was AB 327, which was a making swatting calls a wobbler. So if people have previously been convicted of swatting calls, it could then turn that into a felony versus a misdemeanor, which is where it currently lives. That one is stalled right now in between houses, so it's held in committee for submission. So that one is stalled there. AB 598 was a bill that would provide grants for schools to digitally map out their campuses and allow first responders access to the system to see where events are happening, allow teachers or users of the application to put information into the system to allow first responders to know, like, you know, if it was an active shooter situation, this is where the suspect is, this is how many injuries we might have. It kind of gives more information sharing to first responders. That one is in the same status as AB 327, which means it's kind of stalled between the houses for a little bit more review. Nationwide bills, we were following HR 5201, which is how the FCC will enforce the laws that came with Carey's Law. And if anybody's not familiar with Carey's Law, what that was a mother was having a medical emergency, or there was a medical emergency in a hotel. The 9-year-old daughter was trying to call 911, but because of the PBX system in the hotel, she wasn't getting an outside line. She didn't know she needed to dial a number prior to dialing 911, and that ended up, unfortunately, Carey passed away. But as part of that, the law came out that PBX phone lines should not require a number to be dialed prior to being able to reach 911. So 5201 is about how the FCC will enforce the things that came along with those laws. It's only in its introduction phase now, so we'll keep an eye on that one. And kind of similar to that, 5200 is how the FCC will improve their reporting to the public, to first responders, and to other organizations after disasters have happened. So that reporting will, how the FCC reports that back to us, will have a little bit more structure with this bill, but it's also in the introduction phase. So. And to end on a highlight, one bill that actually did pass all the way and went into effect January 1st of this year is California Assembly Bill 645. It's really for our fire and EMS partners who provide pre-arrival instructions, emergency medical dispatch. The state is now putting into effect stringent dispatch training regulations, and they will require these to be in effect by January of 2027. But with that, that also means that there is some financial component to it that the state will be required to subsidize. So, but that went into effect January 1st, and it's 645 if you want to read more on that. Assembly Bill 645. Do you want me to do operations as well? Yeah. Okay. I'm also head of the operations committee. So like many meetings, we will have an operational breakout after the main meeting has concluded here. So if you are on the operational side of things and would like to stay after and meet with us, we will meet after lunch to talk about some of the things that are facing dispatch centers operationally, staffing, technology. It's an opportunity for us to come together and talk about some of the things that are affecting our industry today. So feel free to stay and participate in that.
Perfect, thank you. Anna, you got one more. Programs? Upcoming meetings? I could do it if you want. So our next meeting, really the only thing, the programs, Anna mentioned the awards banquet at Oak Farm Vineyard. And then our next meeting will be February 12th in Roseville at the Maydew Community Center. So look for invites for that coming up very soon. And with that, why don't we go right into our commercial sponsor, invite him to come on up. So our commercial sponsor for today is Googly, and Kevin Pershing will introduce himself and his company to us.
Hello, hello. Jim, you got, okay, we're on, I think. Let me get a little bit closer to my mouth. Okay. It's great to be here. Happy New Year. It's been a long time since I've been up in front of this group, probably 3 or 4 years now, but I have a lot of familiar faces still. I have to say a lot of folks in this field stay in their jobs for long periods of time. Anyway, my name is Kevin Persing, and I'm going to kind of go through this slide deck. I was supposed to be here with my CEO this morning, but he's got 4 kids, and one of them brought home a cold and shared it with the rest of the family, so he didn't make it. Kind of give you an idea of the company itself. You see on the upper left-hand side, that's Dan Leaf. He's our co-founder and one of the patent holders and inventors of their product. He's been in the industry. He started 3 startups so far. They were all integrators in the IRCS, or in-building communications space for public safety. So he's got a lot of experience with that. So does Josh. Josh is the technical guy on our team, which has invented a lot of these technologies and built them out. And anyway, combined, they put together this product. I am actually the guy they just recently hired. I've only been on the job for all of 5 weeks now. I'm very excited about it. I basically courted him at IWC last year, and we talked about what this product could do, and it was one of those things where I made up my mind at that point, I got to do this. So here I am. Nevertheless, I've been in the industry about 20 years when it comes to the in-building DAS, public safety, bidirectional amplifier space. Most of the time I've been in front of this group talking about that. A lot of times I've shared sessions where Greg Glenn and I would talk about some of the harm these systems cause to the network. And unfortunately, I've been on the side of the business where I was selling or working with the OEMs that sell these products, which actually cause damage to the networks if they're installed incorrectly. So I'm glad to be on the other side of the fence. So now I work for a company that develops a product that can actually mitigate a lot of those problems. Anyway, Diana, she's our CFO. She is also the CFO I had at Fiveplex Honeywell, one of my previous positions, and she's a great resource for our team. Kind of give you an idea of the company overview. We're based out of San Marcos, Texas. Our mission is basically to make sure the systems that give you coverage inside of a structure continuously work, not just after the annual inspection and the system was fixed for a period of time to work after that point. So we can actually provide real-time data, what's going on with that network on a day-by-day basis. It's kind of a product where we use software as a service along with some hardware to provide solutions. And this is really what we're looking forward to do, about being able to provide real-time alerts, what's going on with those networks, and be able to give the license holders and the HJs control over those networks. If there's a problem, they can shut it down with an app on their phone. 90% of the communication side buildings are unmonitored. Basically, that leaves the ability for events to happen where public safety coverage doesn't exist. And that could create a situation where both the building owner and anybody involved in the process of trying to rescue a life could be liable for that, because it's something that needs to be working and needs to be working 24/7. There's a lot of regulatory mandates regarding the FCC, the NFPA, and the local HJ codes. What we are talking about. The solution is googly, is always on life safety infrastructure. Basically, anything to do with public safety communications is considered life safety. And what we can actually do is send those alerts via an AWS server to a mobile app, to fire panel installations, basically giving real-time visibility when needed to those that need it. You know, the bigger picture, I'll just kind of go through this quickly. High rises, schools, airports. There's just so many buildings out there that haven't or are not currently covered that need coverage, and those that do have coverage, we don't know if the system is actually working until somebody goes on an annual inspection and actually test it to make sure it's actually currently working. I'm not going to spend too much time on this particular slide at this point in time, but let me see, I got to go on. Here's our stakeholders. License holder on the top. This is everybody that runs the radio infrastructure for your city or county. They have been the ones who have suffered the results of a lot of bad installs over the years. Because it basically adds noise to their networks. And a lot of times when this noise happens, it can actually degrade the performance of the system in a big way. Every time that noise floor raises, it actually makes the coverage pattern of that particular site diminish. So, I mean, if you have 50 miles of coverage when the system was built, you add noise to that system, it might be 40 miles of coverage from that system because the noise levels increase. So the ASJ is, of course, your fire departments typically. The fire marshal's office is enforcing code, and they do what they do because they need to. And, you know, unfortunately, there's been a side effect because this code came out originally in 2009. There wasn't a lot of direction or influence to get the fire departments to work very closely with the license holders, the people that run the radio networks. And so they're enforcing their code. Systems were put in, but a lot of times they were not put in with regards to how that impacts the macro network. So you've got system integrators installing products, and of course you've got the building owners. So kind of talk about what we're dealing with here. On the left-hand side, I have the public safety code was designed in building installations or bidirectional amplifiers were installed to meet public safety communications sites, buildings, and structures. That's all part of what the code originally started with in 2009. It was an alternative to fireman phone jacks that exist in the elevator lobbies only, and you're only as good as how far that cord stretches before you can't communicate anymore. So it was a welcome adoption to a lot of ASJs and firefighters. Like I said, typically these were applied to new construction after 2009 and later, and it depends on when that city adopted the code and what version of that code and when it was adopted that it became enforceable. Codes and standards change each cycle. You know, we've seen several cycles since 2009. All of them seem to increase a certain amount of changes to enforcement which support radio communications to make sure there aren't as many issues. For example, you know, stating what RF isolation values are. Tests like near far test, you know, and talking about TDI, time domain interference, which exists in that zone between the building with coverage and the outside signal. And it also deals with other RF concerns. And so these are things that are merging their way into the code to try and help build a better system inside of a building. ASJs and public safety radio system operators that work together, that do not work together, and create standards and enforce them will have, will have much better outcomes for the stakeholders, for all stakeholders. In other words, so if you do enforce your code and you work with the license holders to make sure that it gets enforced correctly, they've created a standards document to protect their macro networks, and those get followed. That becomes a way to make sure that the macro networks aren't degraded as much as they could have been without it. On the right-hand side, most ASJs started to enforce ERCs without the involvement of a public safety radio license holder. Back when this code came out, it was a code. A lot of them said, okay, we're going to do this. the integrators in the space said, okay, what are your frequencies? I don't know. and it became a paper chase, so to speak, to try and find out what it was they had to support to make those systems work. And it was a bit of a challenge. I was actually working for an integrator with Greg 20-something years ago, and we had to work hard to find out the information we needed to make the system play right. ERC's integrators had little or no guidance related to RF infrastructure. They installed systems anyway. A lot of these integrators or installations were issued to the low bidder of a contract. Basically, they would sacrifice design and sometimes do whatever they could to be the low-cost provider so they can get the job. It doesn't always mean the best install. AHJs that have not coordinated with the FCC and the license holder for ERC standards, it's kind of a potential brewing of problems that can happen. And I've always been a strong advocate, even when I'm on the other side of the fence, working as a BDA OEM, of making sure that not only are integrators trained and they understand what they're doing and how it could degrade the macro network if they don't do it correctly. It's very important that you make sure that the installed solution actually meets the need for the code enforcement, but it's also important that it meets the need to not cause harm to the macro network. Improperly installed systems have consumed countless hours of city RF technicians and costing millions of real dollars to these network operators. Next. Currently, there's a FCC docket number that is out there where they're taking comments from different organizations across the United States on the impact that is being caused by bidirectional amplifiers or ERC systems installed in buildings. And these are just some of them. I mean, it kind of got it highlighted in red, commission should commit or fail-safe or interference shutdown. Require that Part 90 signal boosters incorporate self-monitoring capability and automatic shutdown. One of the OEMs says they believe there's 100,000 boosters have been deployed across the United States. How many of them are monitored? How many of them have the ability to remotely shut these down if you need to? Now, this is another one. This is San Francisco. They actually put some real dollar amounts on the cost of these systems actually causing issues with their macro network. And it's pretty stunning to think that this is happening. It's happening now. It's happening all across the United States. Douglas County has spent hundreds of hours and thousands of dollars troubleshooting issues regarding BDAs, bad installs. It's a resource drain. The last one talks about diverting money and technical staff to solve problems with BDAs when they'd rather spend their money and time on something that actually benefits public safety coverage. So these are comments that are actually with the FCC right now. The FCC hasn't ruled on anything yet, but they're going to probably come up with some ideas on things that might make a change in a positive direction. Okay, this is actually the fire code for 2027. This is what NFPA 1225 has. It is actually coming out with the verbiage that allows the AHJ, along with a license holder, to create a standard which would include remote monitoring. What this would do is each one of these BDAs installed has a donor antenna that goes to the roof, and these donor antennas are sometimes actually causing extra noise to the macro network. But this would allow a license holder, if they sense there's a problem with that particular installation, they can remotely shut it down. And it would save them the problem of having to deal with rolling boots or rolling cars to an area where they know there's a problem without knowing which BDA is the problem. Sometimes the old days, they were actually physically having to show up on site, unplugging the BDA, checking their spectrum analyzer to see if the problem went away. Then they go to the next one. And it's very time consuming and it's a lot of work to do that. We're getting to the point now where there's no reason why you can't do this electronically and from an app on your phone. So anyway, this is kind of a code that's coming. There are ASJs right now that are starting to enforce this and write this in their standards document for the that's actually prepared by the radio frequency license holder. They're starting to say it must include monitoring and be able to do these certain things on their site. Kind of talking about what we're doing. You know, of course, we have you know, the ERC systems being enforced by the ASJ. Every BDA will transmit noise when it's transmitting. It's just an unavoidable fact of life. Environmental changes such as donor antenna azimuth changes, new construction nearby the building that you're currently that's currently operational will make a change to the way the signal propagates. You know, so in other words, if you've got a high-rise building that's 60 stories, it's been in operation and it works for many years. It's got an antenna on the roof. You build a 30-story high-rise next to that building. It's got an antenna on the roof, and it's pointing right into the side of the 60-story building. Not good. That's one of those things that create problems. But it happens, and it creates systems where they actually take down the networks at times. LA Fire is a good example of that. They've got 8 channels, and I think only 6 of them are working right now because of this kind of issue. So environmental changes can make a difference. One thing that I talk about, you see at the bottom of the slide, I've got like an example of an antenna installed on a roof. It's on what they call a cinder box sled. They put a sled on a roof so they don't penetrate the membrane. They mount an antenna on it, and that sled can be moved. One of the things that we live in an earthquake area. If we have an earthquake, that thing's probably going to move all over the place in the road, and the azimuth of that antenna is going to get thrown off. So it's probably not going to be pointing at the donor site. It could be pointed at a neighboring antenna or a neighboring building, or it could be pointed over the roof across an antenna that's mounted underneath it, you know, inside the building, and go into an oscillation. Anyway, oscillating signal boosters have a very strong negative impact. What I mean by oscillating is if I were to take this microphone, and I don't have any freestanding speakers in here, but were to stand in front of the speaker, it would make this noise, because I'm taking the noise from the speaker, re-amplifying it, and every time I speak, it's going to create this oscillating noise until one of 2 things happens. Either I separate myself from that speaker so it's not feeding back into the microphone. Well, the same thing happens with radio communications. If you have a BDA that's oscillating, it will keep that oscillating loop of noise that it creates until you do one of 2 things. You separate or get isolation from the 2 antennas that it's oscillating with. That's one of those things in our business. It's the black eye in our industry. It can take down a network, and it's not a good thing. I got a call from an FCC guy about 15 years ago. Somebody put a system in Miami that took down the network for 3 days. And they had no public safety comms, nothing for fire or PD. They were flying helicopters in the air, trying to track down where the problem was, and it took them 3 days to find it. But when they did find it, that integrator faced a pretty stiff fine for what they did. Nevertheless, what we are planning to do, and this is Q2 of this year, is developing a monitoring product. Now, this is a box that would reside next to the BDA itself, and it would actually have the ability to monitor the signal coming from the donor antenna. If there's changes to that donor signal level, let's just say the azimuth on the antenna went off, it would detect that. If there's noise floor level increases coming in on that antenna, it can detect that too. And I can actually make a color change on a GIS map where all these locations are installed. You know, they're all green, everything looks great. All of a sudden we see noise floor increase in this area next to this downtown area where there's 6 buildings installed with these systems. And all of a sudden it goes from green to yellow. And now I've got an indicator on that icon that the noise floor went up by this value. And that could be defined by the license holder. They tell us, you know, this amount of noise increase over this window of time is a flag. I want to flag that. So it would be a way for them to determine when there's a noise floor increase that impacts their macro and where it is. So, you know, in that ring of yellow icons that have noise floor increases, you might have one that went red, okay? It's a BDA in a building. You had somebody up there on the rooftop changing something with an air handler for the HVAC system. They bump the antenna, and it's oscillating at this point in time. That kind of stuff happens in the real world, and it's something that we can now actually monitor and have an idea of what to do about that problem. So anyway, we can talk about, you know, groupings of noise-affected BDAs, and basically send people to where the problem is as opposed to having to discover where the problem is. It flags physical damage, like I mentioned, if there's a severed coax, donor azimuth change. If there's something like a crushed cable, you know, the coax cable that we use is about a ½ inch in diameter, and somebody drops a tool on it or rolls over it with a hand truck, it'll actually cause problems with the way it actually works. And so if we can sense what's going on with that and alarm or alert somebody that there's a problem with that, they can deal with it before it becomes an issue. Here's kind of a general basic architecture of our system. You know, so far I've been talking mostly about the monitoring capability when it comes to monitoring the donor signal levels and providing actionable intelligence with that. We have these. It's called the G-Node. It's actually a device that would exist inside the building near an antenna that's installed in the building. This would send out a pulse every, you know, 5 minutes or 3 minutes. It's something to be programmable. And it basically gives kind of like a life pulse. This antenna is actually working and communicating back to the BDA. And it can also, it's got a little sensor port here. It can sense smoke, it can sense temperature, it can sense humidity changes. We've got seismic sensors in it too. And we're actually working on, it has to be something we record a lot of this, but GSD, or gunshot detection, where it can actually give you location-based information on events when they happen in a given area. And I'll talk about it in a second, but we're getting a lot of serious interest in New York for a few of these things that they're concerned about. So anyway, any kind of, you know, that you see down on the right-hand side, you've got the googly box in the corner. It's taking a signal off of the donor antenna, is monitoring that, and we're basically able to take that information. It's also got a port that comes in from the DAS, or distribution, as well, if you wanted to use the antenna monitoring functionality of it. I should just carry this with me. Kind of give you an idea how we manage the information from this. We've got all the data coming into an AWS server, basically. It's distributed out to an app that exists on either your PC or your NOC or your cell phone. And we can actually set all the permission levels to give certain people permission and capability to access certain levels of something versus others which don't have that kind of level of permission. Integrators themselves may be given permission levels for a time frame. They're installing the system, they're commissioning the network, they want to make sure everything works. They've gotten certain levels of permissions to be able to optimize the system to make sure it's correct before they leave the property. And the license holder or ASJ says, okay, you've got a 3-day window to configure this before your permissions with Googly go away. So there's a lot of that with that, and what we're looking at doing is providing real-time solutions to solve the problems in real time as opposed to waiting for an annual inspection to identify the problem in the first place. Here's something that it's actually going on right now, and this video was taken, I'm going to show it to you in a second, just about a week and a half ago. We have the way that New York has it, they have a different type of system. They have what they call an ARCS 2.0, which is coming out this year. They don't use BDAs. They actually have a full-on distribution of the building with all the antennas inside the structure, but it runs into a radio system. And so you actually have to activate that radio system when you arrive on site. So they've got a center, where the fire personnel arrive to, or the public safety personnel to arrive to first. They turn on a radio system, it becomes active and usable at that point in time. Their big concern is, I want to make sure that the antennas on each one of those floors are working the way you should. I think their concern is, what happened with 9/11. Even if you had antennas in those buildings, you'd find a lot of them didn't work because they were destroyed when the planes hit. And they would be able to know where they have coverage and where they don't have coverage. So this is something they're requiring. It's called 3D modeling. They've got a 27-inch touchscreen in the fire control rooms of these larger structures, and it's allowed to give them the ability to look at and zoom in on where the problems might exist. Now, the building that we're going to show in this video is actually that's not it. That didn't work. There you go. Oh no. Jim and I did this before we started. Okay, this is kind of like he's clicking on floor 17. It pulls up the floor plan. It shows the antenna conditions on floor 17. He goes back out to floor 14. And it wasn't showing any alarms on that floor, so of course you can look at all those antennas and see what you've got going on up there. Then he goes back out to, this is something that the New York Fire wanted, and what they wanted to see what they call a reflected antenna plan. Anyway, that's one of their things they do. Then they go back and they can monitor the radio infrastructure in that building as well. So this is a radio repeater. For our use here in the West Coast, this would probably be a link to the GUI for the bidirectional amplifier and show you what's actually going on with that BDA itself. And we could show trouble alarms and issues within that structure. So this is what New York is requiring. They're going to start enforcing it. Get back out to my slide deck. There we go. And it's something that hasn't existed before. It's a new technology. We're going to start including that as being something that's available in the West as well. Anyway, the G node, which is this guy, we're talking Q2 having what they call a software-defined radio, or SDR, built into it. So it can receive PTP ID or P25 IDs from a transmitting radio. Okay, somebody walks into a building, they key up. 3 of these receive a signal, one stronger, one's less strong, and the extra one is even less strong than that. It can give us an x-axis of where that person is in the structure. It can also give us actual identification that person is a first responder. They're transmitting. They're with the fire side, or they're the EMS person, or something in that building. If this building ends up having an event where there is an after-action report, this is data. This is something that can be used as valuable data to find out what happened, when, where, who was there. It becomes very helpful. So we can have location-based information with that. Like I mentioned earlier, that these can actually do a lot more than just send a ping to an antenna. It can sense temperature increases, humidity level changes. Down in Florida right now, they're really interested in humidity level changes. And we could set a time level. If the humidity increases this many degrees within X number of minutes, alarm. We want to know about that. And it means there's something happening in that particular building that is causing that problem. It would be really helpful for temperature and humidity changes in a data center. If you've got antennas and distributed throughout a data center, and you've got these out there monitoring changes in temperature, that could mean you've got a problem coming up. kind of give you a quick idea. This is what we call super admin. This would be basically the AHJ defining who has what access to the information. And you'll see on the right-hand side roles, you know, AHJ, technicians, admin, supervisor, admin, technician. This is kind of another super admin view of buildings that are currently covered, and it kind of gives you can put pictures and stuff like that. The other thing that we can do is there's so much availability via the cloud to add additional information about that particular building. So, and we can have full as-built drawings of a system as it's installed included in the system. So when you're clicking on a building, you're not only pulling up that building and the particulars about it, but you know exactly where the equipment is. You got the as-built. And we're even talking to a few fire departments about the possibility, if that building has hazmat materials in it, including a link to be able to open up all the MSDS sheets for what is in that on that floor of that building, so they can deal with it appropriately. Another example of kind of some of the software review. This would be like adding a building, how that would work. Again, kind of a little slide deck. This is an example of what it would look like on our app for a cell phone. Again, you know, you would be able to click on the floor plan, and it would actually give more information to it. It would allow you to actually have, you know, all the contact information about that particular building, building owner, and some of the AHJ contacts. The example of, again, a lot of these are New York-based projects because we're doing a lot of stuff out there right now, but this would show you kind of like the status of some of the G nodes, which is the little box behind me, you know, the antenna strength and battery load, battery percentages. Just another quick example of what that looks like. This would be notifications. This is something that's definable by the AHJ/license holder, how much of what they want to see and when. You know, it's something you set. You know, I don't want to see an alert unless it's, in New York City, they don't want to see it unless it's red. You know, they don't really want to have to bother with anything else. If it's a yellow type of maintenance type issue, they want that to go to the person, the building owner, and the person repairing the product. But if it's a red, they want to know about it. It's another example of another building configuration setup. You know, one of the genius things is it's got a little QR code here. So if that was an antenna up there, I'd put it above the ceiling tile. Before I did that, I'd scan it with my phone, the QR code, identify it on the floor plan. It's that antenna, and I'm done. Just walk away. Here's you know, kind of what the building alarm screen looks like. It allows you to kind of look at several things that are on that, and it can drill down to each one of these things along, you know, within that. So it's got a channel partner view, and it's got a, you know, probably a building owner view that's available, and they have all this capability. The real thing is that we're allowing notification to building owners, and we can actually create escalation levels of this needs to be repaired. If it's a minor alarm, it might go to the building owner to do something to get it fixed, and go to the integrator that's involved with that property as well, just so they can get it taken care of. So, some sensor data. This kind of gives you an idea, like for instance, I think on the left-hand side, I can't really read it from here, but it talks about humidity levels. Like I said, with humidity or temperature, you can set a level that needs to be seen before you alert or alarm, and you know, a time frame in which it has to get to that point. So if it's a quick rise, you can actually deal with, you know, there's something going on. This is kind of an annual inspection. One of our goals this year is to replace the annual inspection with an electronic version of it, where these antennas are actually indicating health to the macro, back to the system to make sure that it's operational. The box itself is being looked at and evaluated, make sure it's operational. and that donor signal levels haven't changed from the original commissioning date, and it gives us a point to where we can actually say, okay, this meets the requirement as established by the AHJ, and we can go ahead and submit an electronic version of a building report to validate the system's working. And the nice thing is it's doing the reporting all day long, every day, 365 a year. So annual inspections are good if you catch a problem, but you don't know how long ago it went bad. You really could have a system that died 2 weeks after the last inspection, and you don't know. You won't know until you get to the building, and all of a sudden your radios don't work. So this is kind of our way of actually looking at this and creating an actionable benefit to both the building owners, the occupants, and the first responders. Kind of give you an idea what our boxes look like. This is the G box. This would be located close to the BDA and be connected to the donor signal. This is a little more information about that. This is the opened up version of this. It does have a battery in it that's good for 2 years of continuous use. It also has, you plug in 24 volts DC and power it that way as well. So it's something that can be powered like a fire alarm type piece of equipment and not have to worry about the batteries ever going dead or having to get changed out. That's it. I don't know if I'm on time or past time. Doing okay, Jen? Okay. Yeah, I'd be happy to take questions. Go ahead, Michael.
Sorry, I missed that page about how the individual node devices would be powered. Is the battery how long?
The G box itself, which is the head end, has 24 hours of battery backup built into it.
Okay.
The G nodes, these are good for about 2 years.
2 years, you said?
Yes.
Okay.
Anybody else? Go ahead.
Kevin, what communicates to the G node? Hold on.
The unit that connects to the G nodes, right? There's a whole bunch of G nodes throughout this building.
Right.
You have one main controller or whatever that's talking to these units, but that has to talk back. So it has to talk to a network. It has to get out. So is that going to be mounted? Is it mounted where the DAS is mounted, or do you actually run an antenna up to the top, or is it? I mean, how do you secure that it's got connectivity? Put it that way, or backup?
The G box itself has a connection to the distribution inside the building. So that's just your regular DAS, public safety distribution. These are sending out data ping, and it could be defined how often you want to send that data ping, or if there's a sensor ping of some sort, it would do it immediately. So if there's a sensor need, and that just goes through the antenna to the G box at the head end. Because that's the only connection. Is just a data ping.
And that G node would tell us whether the antenna is defective or not.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And it also takes a
basically
look
tell
at
you that it's got either you have coverage and it hasn't changed from the original values or not.
Nice.
So in other words, good example is you got a hallway in a hospital somewhere and it's got open ceilings. Janitor's walking down the hallway, he's got this big old extension ladder on his shoulder and he smacks an antenna. Next time this thing pings, it's probably not going to work as well as it did prior to getting smacked. So it would send an indicator that there's something wrong with this antenna.
Is your product currently available right now, or is it going to be released in 2020?
Pardon me?
When's it going to be available?
Most of this is going to be available Q2 this year.
Okay.
We do have some beta units we're trying right now that are in buildings that we're testing out.
Now I have one last question.
Sure.
In New York, I remember reading that their DAS systems were actually turned off.
They are turned off.
Yeah, they're turned off. So
Yeah.
you don't have the noise issue unless there's a problem
Exactly.
and it turns on and it creates issues. How come they don't do that across the country?
You did a lot of people that ask that question. Yeah.
Hold on, I'm coming. You need a mic.
All right, yeah. Well, New York uses what they call ARCs, which is auxiliary radio communications, which are basically built by several manufacturers, but they're a repeater, like you would put in your car, or not pack RT. And so when an event occurs, right, fireman comes into the building, flips on, and they typically have two pairs so that they can have two talk groups simultaneously running. So they're flipping on that repeater when they come into the building. Now, that in itself is fine for the fire department, but when you think about the intent of what happened with the whole 9/11 thing, it's about interoperability. So if I am running into a building and I'm chasing an active shooter and I'm a police officer, do I have the option to go up and push a button? No, I don't. I want coverage right away. And the unfortunate part is, and people have heard me say this, the fire code has screwed themselves severely, because what's ended up happening is they've screwed up their own radio networks. And now we're trying to dig out of that. You know, guys like Kevin, myself, we're trying to come up with solutions to backtrack 7 years of ill-advised installation of active equipment. And how do we do that, and how do we make it work, and how do we make it better? But I think that we don't want to lose track of the idea that we want to provide communication for all first responders, not just for the fire department, but for the police department and everybody else. Because, hey, a cop chasing an active shooter is pretty important too. And so you don't want to just say, well, we're not going to deal with the police, and we're not going to deal with even, say, the dog catcher or somebody from an electrical utility. We got to make sure that they all have communications in the event of an emergency.
The video I had actually, showed the antennas in the building, but also showed the ARCS network portion of it. So you got to see the screen where they can evaluate the condition of their radio infrastructure. That's exclusive to New York. They're the only ones doing this. Like Greg said, they came up with a way better solution to avoid the noise problems that are created by VDAs. And it's the only city that I know of in the U.S. that does that. They still want to monitor all the antennas inside the building to make sure they're correctly operational. But the way they monitor their ARC system is through that same 3D modeling, where they can actually click on the radio device, the transmitting device, the repeater, to look at its, evaluate its condition as well. What we're going to do is take that same model, and instead of the repeater, we'd have the BDA being monitored. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Thank you. When it comes to data sovereignty, you mentioned AWS. Is there any way to run it on your own private server, or is it only through AWS?
That's a good question, and I think that the conversation with New York is they want to run it through their NOC, and that's how we're doing it with that particular application. They want everything going through their NOC. They want control over all that.
Thanks.
Yeah, I think I did ask this question directly to you guys once, in the response I got back. This was part of a long list of different things I was asking about, but the response was yes, that you could do this completely in-house. I don't know, it might be more expensive. So with regard to the spectrum analyzer feature, I don't think they showed that much there. Right. Is that on every node inside the building, or is it just one on the main box? Like for us, that's our main concern, is that these aren't causing interference. We're not as involved on the coverage side, although I could certainly see the long-term benefit if these could replace coverage testing, which would be expensive.
It's funny, 2 days ago, it said spectrum analyzer on all those slides. Dan thought it was less sexy. So he suggested I just put RF monitoring in there. But basically, yes, it's a spectrum analyzer built into the G box that can monitor spectrum, and you can tell it what you want it to do, log into the analyzer itself and actually see what's going on. Same thing with the G nodes. It'll have a spectrum analyzer built into it. Some of the things we're talking about, this is where, you know, if you guys want to take my information from the last slide, I'd love to hear other stuff you would like to see. One guy that runs a lot of radio infrastructure down in Southern California thought it would be really cool if this thing could transmit like a 1-second burst on frequency within the band, but not on a public safety channel, to give an indication of the full system throughput from that antenna in that quarter all the way up through the network to the BDA, out the BDA to the macro network, so I can look at what signal levels are being received at the macro network. And that's not out of the question. That's something that's doable. So I mean, there's a lot of stuff that we're looking at as developing additional capabilities within our network. We're not really limited by anything but our imagination, so to speak. One other thing that I was talking to Greg with earlier is the possibility that, you know, one of the concerns that we see, I mean, you know, Safer Buildings Coalition had a thing where they were talking, and let me know if I'm going over time. It looks like I've got till 11 or 2 minutes, okay. One of the things that we're talking about is the possibility of actually using this to detect, you know, P25 IDs or PTID from a radio. You've got downtown LA, a fire truck out there with a 50-watt mobile keyless transmitter. That RF is not just going back to dispatch, it's going to all the buildings around it that have antennas in their ceilings. And it's keying up each one of those simultaneously. And sometimes those can cause serious issues on an RF network. Being able to take the fact that we realize it's one P25 ID keying up all those buildings simultaneously, there's no reason why we can't take an AI component of that and say, okay, this is a simultaneous transmit from a single ID. Those BDAs don't need to be transmitting uplink right now. and shut down that feature. That's just, like I said, it's one of those things that wakes me up at night and go, oh, I wonder if we could do this. So, I mean, there's no reason why we can't. It's something that's doable. Anyway, I will want to say thank you so much for listening to me. I'm sitting right over here next to Iggy, so if you want to talk to me. Everybody knows Iggy. And you know, feel free to ask me any questions you might have.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. And right now we'll take a 15-minute break. We'll start up again at 11 o'clock. Thank you.
Exploit our dreams, but don't forget money ain't what it seems. They say no talent there. Now you'll hear what they want you to hear. Pretty pop,
All righty, everybody. I guess. All right. Time for our keynote from Cal OES. We have Steve Yarbrough to give us our 911 update for the coming year. Steve, I'll turn it over to you.
Good morning. Can everybody hear me okay? All right. Thank you. Yeah, so thank you for having me. First of all, it's a great opportunity to come talk with people who are out doing the frontline work out in the field. I know, there's a lot going on in our program that has been happening in the last, 6 to 12 months, 18 months. A lot of change has happened. And so I think, I recognize some of the faces here. Many of you I don't know. So I'll introduce myself. My name's Steve Yarbrough. A lot of you might have some dealings with me in the past in my prior capacity as the radio communications branch manager at Public Safety Communications. So I had been working at PSC for a number of years on the radio side, and most recently dealing with the CRIS system and its deployment across the state of California. And so I've met a number of people in that capacity, and now being the Deputy Director of Public Safety Communications, I've taken on the third branch of the organization, which is the 911 side of the house. And so I had been somewhat familiar in passing with that program, just as a peer organization, but now that I'm responsible for, what's going on there, I've learned a great deal over the last 6 months or so, and sort of threw myself right into the deep end, learning about Next Gen 911. And so I'll start off addressing the Next Gen 911 system and where we stand with that and where we're going. Many of you know we had begun deployment of that system. That's about 5% of all of the PSAPs in the state of California. But we started noticing some issues early on and sort of monitoring some bumps in the process of transitioning onto that system. And so, just for the sake of background on that, many of you probably know this, and forgive me if I'm telling you something you already know, but we pressed the pause button on the deployment or the transition onto that system back in the February timeframe of 2025 because of the difficulties that we had experienced in the transitioning process. We pressed the pause button so we'd have an opportunity to evaluate how things were going and sort of figure out what we needed to do to make the entire transition process a little bit smoother and also solve some problems architecturally with the system. So we wanted to do an evaluation and map out a course forward that would still achieve the same goal of getting that next generation 911 system to the PSAPs, but do it in a way that was probably more reliably smooth and easier for people, particularly out on the front lines. We want to make sure that we're designing systems for people who are using them. And so we took that break, and then last November, we published our transition plan, which sort of maps out where we're going to turn our attention to moving forward for the deployment and adoption of the next gen system in California. So that was published at our board meeting in November of last year, and I'll talk to you a little bit about what some of our findings were from the evaluation period, and then what some of the adjustments are that we're going to be making going forward. So as we went out and talked to all of the PSAPs who had transitioned onto the network, and we also talked with many stakeholders in the community and also the vendor community, so we could learn everything we could about what was going well, what was not going so well, and what could be improved. And we found three key issues during that time frame that really were coming up again and again in the conversations that we were having with the stakeholders. And one of the first things that became an obvious point that needed to be addressed was that the PSAPs having to handle calls that come in both on the legacy system and on the next-gen system was a significant problem that needed to be addressed because of how time-consuming it is. And when you're in that role of answering those calls, you don't need to be devoting computing horsepower to figuring out which kind of call is this and how do I treat that call differently from the other calls. And so if you have a legacy call that comes in or a next-gen call that comes in, we want them to look and feel the same. And so that was one of the key issues that came up during our tour of talking to the stakeholders, is that's an issue that needs to be addressed. Another issue we found is that the architecture of the system itself relied on regional providers. So there are 4 regional providers and 1 statewide provider of the next-gen system. And having that many different players in the system, to say nothing of the service providers for the telephone calls that are coming in, there were too many opportunities for something to go wrong and not know who exactly to talk to get that thing fixed. And so when you start having that many people involved in the chain, it's easy to not know who to talk to, or for people to misidentify whose responsibility it is to fix a problem with the network. And so having the multi-vendor architecture is something that was identified in our process in figuring out how we could improve things. So that was the second key issue we found. And then the third key issue we noticed from all of our conversations is that the migration onto the system and all of the testing that's required to do that at the PSAP level was a burden that these understaffed PSAPs were experiencing, and that ultimately was taking time and energy away from them doing their main function. And that burden probably was an obstacle to them wanting to adopt coming onto the next-gen system right off the bat. And so that was the third key issue we found. So having identified those 3 key issues, we wanted to sort of figure out a path forward that would address those things and still accomplish the mission of deploying the next-gen 911 system. And so as we're doing that, there are a lot of decisions that would go into how you would solve those problems. And I think one of the things we wanted to set up was sort of a structure for how we would make those kind of decisions that impact the architecture of the system or the user experience of the system. All of those decision points needed to adhere to some structure that got us closer to the goal and mission of our organization. And so we sort of wrote down, and in writing them down, these design principles. We wrote down 4 design principles, and in writing them down, it kind of makes it to where, everybody is aligned on this is how we're going to structure our decision-making process. And if we're making decisions that don't adhere to these design principles, then we need to re-question those decisions. And if it's an architectural thing, it needs to adhere to number 1, system resilience has to be a key driver of how we make decisions. So that was our first design principle. Above everything, high availability is important. If the system is down, it's not doing anybody any good. So system resilience had to be our key point. The second design principle was the user experience needed to be improved. And if you're designing a system that relies on a dispatcher to decide between a legacy system and the next-gen system how to handle it, you're putting a burden on them that should not be. And realistically, that it speaks to a process that isn't really designing the system for the user. And I think in a lot of technology these days, there's a shift towards user-centered design and in making things intuitive for the person who's going to be using the technology. And that, I don't believe, is a principle that the previous deployment of the system really took into consideration, or if it did, it was a secondary consideration. So I wanted to make sure that we had resilience at the top and user experience was right there with it as a principle that we were going to design for. So making sure that the end user has an intuitive and low impact experience was important to us. The third principle that we came up with was we wanted to minimize the complexity of the system. So with technology the way it is and moving forward, you can do some very amazing things and cobble together different technologies to accomplish things that were never possible before. When you do that, you put all these different links in a chain and you are multiplying the surface area where a problem can occur. And so by making a complicated network, we were actually building in some amount of fragility into that network that wasn't serving our purposes or interests. And so that 4-vendor model that we had spent a lot of time designing actually was creating some of the problem. And it was because having a complex design like that gives you that opportunity for things to not go perfectly. And so as we move forward, one of our design principles is to minimize the complexity, making things only as complex as they need to be to meet the business requirements. This is it needs to be a high availability system. It needs to be public safety grade. And when we do that, to making sure that it will withstand, years and years of service. I mean, the legacy system that was in place had been in place for decades. So the one we're designing now needs to last for a long time. It'll be the foundation for everything that we do going forward for decades again. And so we need to make sure we get the design right at this time. And so minimizing the complexity, I think, will serve our purposes going forward. And so that was our third design principle. And then our fourth design principle is understanding that money is not an unlimited resource. And so as we invested in the system, over the previous 5 to 6 years, there's a lot of money put into the next gen 911 system. We want to make sure that we're leveraging all the investment that has been made up till now in any way that we possibly can going forward. So in other words, we don't want to start over from a blank canvas. We want to use what we can from the existing system and make sure that we're being wise stewards of the resources that we do deploy to it. So those were the 4 design principles: resilience, user experience, minimize complexity, and maximize economic prudence. So that's how we started our process of mapping out how we're going to move forward. And so in combining those things, we came up with a few different changes that we needed to make that we think address those and put us on a stable footing going forward. So I'll talk about a couple of those. One is we need to adopt the use of transitional elements in our system. And that addresses a couple of different things. Now you might think, well, that adds complexity to the system, but it adds that complexity in service to one of our other design principles, which is the user experience one. We want to make the end user free to use the system without the burden of figuring out how to make the system work for them. And so these transitional elements will abstract away from the dispatcher all of those decision points that pertained to using the system. So they are then free to spend their energy engaging with the person who's calling for help and directing resources to them. So by designing these transitional elements and deploying them upstream from the end user, we free the end user up to do their role, and the system works for them in that way. So we're going to adopt the use of transitional elements, and that will help with the end user, and it'll also help with the process of migrating onto the system. That was one of the key issues we found. And addressing that with the use of transitional elements means that we can now perform a lot of testing that is required to migrate onto the system. It can be done without burdening the staff at the PSAP itself. It should be relatively transparent to the PSAP end user. All of that testing can be done without their involvement, and so we're designing with the user in mind, minimizing their burden, making it as intuitive as possible. And these transitional elements built into the system, it's a piece of hardware in the system, make it to where the end user won't be able to perceive all of that work that has gone into it ahead of time. So it also has this benefit where you aren't seeing a different type of experience based on whether it's legacy traffic or next generation traffic. And so it should have the same look and feel when it arrives at a dispatcher's console, and they can then, like I said, focus on doing what they do well. So that's one of the recommendations of the transition plan. The other part of the transition plan I think that's very important is to streamline the service provider model. And I mentioned the previous model had 4 regions throughout the state, and how that created all that opportunity to misdiagnose or perhaps point the finger at somebody else as being responsible for fixing a problem. We're going to shift from that regional model and go to a statewide model where we'll have a service provider who handles the network throughout the state. And what that does is, it gives us a little bit more clarity as to who is responsible. And you might say to yourself, well, that sounds like you're reducing the amount of resilience of the system. And there is some amount of change in that regard, but the way we're addressing that is by having a second statewide provider. So each PSAP is still going to have the redundancy coming into it from each of these service providers that are covering the entire state. And so we'll go from a situation where we have 4 or 5 network providers throughout the state down to where we have 2. So we're minimizing the number, but we're still having the resilience in the design that makes it a high availability public safety grade system. And so as we do those 2 things, we're going to be addressing those key issues, which were, putting the burden on the call taker and the migration testing burdens, and then the 4 service provider model and the interdependencies that it created. Those 3 issues are addressed in those 2 changes, really. There's a lot of nuance that comes with those 2 changes that we're making, but in doing that, that'll put us on a stable footing to move forward. We plan in the coming months to transition off of the contracts that we have with the current vendors and start new contracts with new vendors from the industry, or perhaps some of these same vendors will compete in that RFP process, but we want to make sure that we switch to that statewide model. And so that solicitation for that statewide supplier or vendor of the system is going to be coming out here. First part of 2026, we'll be putting that on the street with the hopes of awarding a contract somewhere around the end of the second quarter, beginning of the third quarter of 26, so that we can begin transitioning PSAPs onto the new network starting towards Q3, Q4 of 26. And then from there, we'll expand over the coming years to get all 450 plus PSAPs onto the system. We anticipate that it'll end up taking on the order of 5 years to accomplish all of that. But as I mentioned in the beginning, we're building a system that we're going to be on and using for decades, and we want to get it right. And so I think taking the time to be deliberate during the last 12-month period, finding out what we needed to change, and then coming up with a plan of how to fix those problems. And now we're kind of on the precipice of being able to start executing on this plan. and making some changes in the real world that we can start pointing to and showing some success with adopting this new plan. So that's kind of the Next Gen 911 update that I wanted to share with you all. There's a couple of other points I wanted to talk about as well, pertaining specifically to the 911 branch. Many of you are familiar with the former branch manager of the 911 branch, Paul Troxel, who retired last fall. So that's a vacant position now that I'm hiring for. I intend to put an advertisement out here in the coming weeks to solicit candidates to be the next branch manager for the 911 system. And so when that happens, I'm hoping that stakeholder groups like this can help get the word out there that we are hiring. We want a qualified person who can come in and provide excellent leadership within the branch, and particularly on the Next Gen 911 project as we move through that. I want to make sure that I get the hire right because this is a very critical role in my organization. And so that's coming up here in the first quarter as well. So a lot of change is happening, but I think if I'm doing my job well, we'll identify the right person for that role. And it's a critical project. I'll need a critical leader for that project. And so I think the future looks bright in that regard. And then, if you don't mind, since the 911 program isn't strictly speaking, the deep end of my knowledge and experience, I've asked Andrew Matson to come up. He has been with the program for, a decade and a half, thereabouts? Yeah, it's almost 2 decades. And so he has the depth of understanding of all of the normal dealings of the program. And so I asked him to come up and brief you guys on what the 911 team is doing. So.
All right, thanks. Nothing says a fun morning like giving a presentation in front of your boss's boss's boss. So, if I'm a little stiff, just kidding. So, as Steve mentioned, we've got a lot going on right now. There are a lot of initiatives that we're driving, and a lot of work being done at the branch level. With Paul's retirement, obviously that left a pretty big gap for us to fill. Internally, right? We're working together to make sure that leadership vacuum isn't felt at the staff level, right? So the supervisors, the managers in the branch are banding together to make sure that we've got the team taken care of and that we're moving the ball forward, right? So right now we've got two really major pushes, two big things that we're working on. Steve already mentioned the RFP, right, for the next gen contract. That's number one right now. That's coming. What'd you say? End of Q1. So it's part of it's part of the overall picture, but there is a little bit more to it. So we've had to effectively work with our current providers. I think most of the people in here know that Atos is the statewide provider for California. We're working on developing that bridge contract that's going to carry us over into the future. So we need something to hold us in place, so that we don't slide back, so that we don't lose any progress, so that we don't, if anybody here has been following the news, so that we don't waste any money that we've spent building this system out, right? These are important factors that we have to consider. So Atos is helping us right now in getting us into a position where we can stay steady and have the PSAPs who have already been migrated taken care of, and we don't have to roll back to legacy. We don't have to worry about those folks for now while we continue forward. So the RFPs are being written right now. Will probably be a single RFP issue with a dual award, right? One in the primary seat, one in that backup seat, 2 statewide networks. So that's being worked on. That's being developed at the branch level. That is a major push that we're working through. Got the whole staff sort of engaged and pushing to get that written. A lot more review than there used to be on these things. So we've got legal looking at it. We've got contracts looking at it. We really are making sure that this one gets done right. We'll have that one ready to go probably end of Q1, and then all hands will be on deck to get started to get that transition done. We're very excited about the prospect of where we're headed. Steve talked about, he talked about transitional elements, right? What does that mean? Well, in real terms, it means legacy selective router gateways, which means that when we migrate traffic, I don't know if you guys were following the last deployment, but what we were doing was we were going PSAP by PSAP, carrier by carrier. It was impossible. It was just absolutely impossible. What it meant really was that we couldn't, if you're at Sacramento PD and you get a call, an I3 call, or a next-gen call, if Sacramento County Sheriff needs that call, but they haven't migrated yet with that same carrier, you couldn't transfer it to them. So we had to make sure that everybody was going with their transfer partners at the same time with the same carriers. The level of coordination required, we didn't even get to Los Angeles. I didn't even want to get to Los Angeles. Under that format, it would have been impossible. So, what these transitional elements, what the legacy select router gateways allow us to do is to move an entire selective router over. Just every PSAP connected to that gets moved over into their effectively their new format. So will there be a change on your screen? Yes, there will be a change, but it will be all at one time every single call. So you won't have a legacy call coming in on this profile, and then your next gen call coming in on this profile with a different look, different alley, different feed. It will look a little bit different. That's just the way it's the way the next gen network is designed, but it'll be all at once. We'll have training for your dispatchers, and then from that point forward, that's what you get. Those are the calls that'll come in. So we think that'll help quite a bit. This is what every other state has done. We tried it to do it a little bit differently. We wanted to maintain a little bit more control over that process and not introduce those elements, but we've changed course. So very excited about where we're headed. We think this is going to be a much more manageable rollout for the state of California and for our office, frankly. I mean, managing it was very, very difficult. For those of you who know me, my last role in the office prior to the one I'm in now, right now I'm program management division chief. So I'm responsible for call handling, for legacy network, and for a number of other things. But my role before this, I was in charge of the next gen rollout. I was the assistant chief of technology in our branch, which was responsible for that rollout. So that was on my plate, and it was difficult. A lot of folks, a lot of people in this room here would call me and say, "Hey, when do I go? When am I going?" Well, I didn't know. We didn't have an answer for you. So this will allow us to take that uncertainty out, which I'm very excited about. We'll have a much easier path to success here. So very, very happy about that. So that project is, right now, tippy top of everyone's list, getting the contract ready for Atos to help us through the transition, that bridge, and then the RFPs, the competitively bid RFPs, to make sure that we have our vendors coming in, ready to go, ready to build out that network and get on with this. The other effort that we're pushing right now, the other big project that we're doing right now is for our call handling contract. So this is a distinction that I make every time I talk, so I probably sound like a broken record to a few of you, but Next Gen 911 is the network, is the call delivery, the call coming into your PSAP. There's a ton of confusion out in the field, so I try to make sure that I explain as best I can the difference. The call coming in from the carriers, that's Next Gen, that's the network. Your call handling, your Vesta or your Viper that you use today, that is your call handling. That is not Next Gen. That is the tool that you use to answer the call, get it into CAD, and get your resources dispatched. So you'll hear a lot of vendors say, we've got Next Gen call handling, we've got Next Gen radio, we've got Next Gen, urinals. Everything is Next Gen, but that's not the case. It's very important that you know that the network bringing your calls in, that's that when we say an I3 call or a next gen call, that's the portion of that. Now your call handling has to be ready to receive that call, has to be able to ingest it, to accept it, and allow you to do your job. But feature functionality is what we're really talking about here, right? Taking all of the things that the supplemental data that come with a next gen call, being able to see those, to do something with those elements. That's where call handling comes into play. So right now, our branch, for those of you who don't know, we manage a master purchase agreement where we have as many vendors as we can bring on that meet the qualifications will come on and offer call handling that we pay for, that we provide to your PSAP. So that contract expires, our current contract expires in June of this year. So we've also got a group of folks dedicated to writing that new RFP, or not RFP, it's an MPA, getting that out on the street. We're about to launch that in a couple weeks here. That'll go out, we'll go through our process, and we will expect to have vendors ready for that in June. So that's when the current contract expires. We're hoping to have no gap in service there for you, which if we succeed, it'll be the first time ever. But we're very excited about this because for those of you who are PSAP folks, you may know that our last contract that we went out for call handling, we had a very sort of strict vision of what we wanted. And we told our vendors, no more on-prem equipment. You can't have a server in the back room. You have to have a cloud or data center-based model for your call handling. And that scared a lot of folks. It scared a lot of PSAPs. A lot of folks weren't ready for it. And we acknowledge that, right? That was a push that we made to try and move the ball forward for the industry on a technology front. May have been a little bit too early. We do acknowledge that. So now we're pulling back a little bit. What we're asking vendors now, when they bid for this upcoming call handling contract, we want whatever they offer, we are okay with accepting. So if it's a cloud or data center model, they can bid on that and they can provide one for you. Or if it's an on-prem model, the server in the back room that you're used to seeing, if you like to see those lights blinking in the back room to make you feel good, we're going to have those as well. So now, it's California, so everyone's a Vesta or a Viper. If you got your Vesta and you want to stay on-prem, Motorola they'll have an option. They will bid. They always do. They'll sell through AT&T. They'll sell through Frontier. They'll have the resellers that the technician that you have today that you know and love will still be available to you, but you'll be able to choose if you want a cloud option or an on-prem option. They're going to have both. And then we have some other vendors that have come on the last contract, like Carbine, that will be present for this new contract. They intend to bid, and then maybe a few faces that we didn't have on the last contract because they didn't have a cloud offering will be coming back into the fold. So we're very excited about this. I don't consider it a step back. I'm looking at these products, these on-prem products. A lot of them are coming with like a transitional capability to get you to cloud in an iterative process through steps. So I think that's great. I think that's good for the PSAPs. If you're not quite ready but you want to get there, hopefully these vendors can help you get there. We just want to be able to procure them for you to get you what you need. We're reaching critical mass in California right now for PSAPs with systems that are aging out for call handling. So that's a big concern for us. Out of the 440 PSAPs we have in the state, got about 300 and almost 320 of them with systems older than 8 years for call handling. That's just, we're in the red. So we want to get these things moving, get these systems replaced. So if you don't know who your 911 advisor is in our office, you can call me, you can call Janae if you know Janae in our office. We have a couple folks here, Michael, Shelley, Mike. They know the people in our office who do this work. We'll get you to the right person. Just reach out to us and we'll make sure to get you taken care of. But that's a big priority for us, is getting those call handling systems taken care of. Other than that, right now, that's really our main focus, are those two fronts, call handling and network. Everything else that we do right now is holding steady. So your MIS, your ECATs, that contract's got another couple years. We're letting that one ride. We will go back out to bid on that when the time comes. Rapid deploy, along with the Rave products, Lightning, and the data sharing platform that we came out with. That contract has another year and a half. So right now, those are, we're watching and we're making sure that we'll be ready for those when the time comes. But our focus is on the call handling and the network at this point. So we'll be transitioning as we get some leadership roles filled. We'll hopefully be able to settle things down a little bit and get back to doing what we do, which is providing you folks with the technology and the calls to get the call or the help they need. So. Any questions? I kind of went fast there. Line forms to the left.
I have a question, but it's unrelated to next gen, so it's okay.
Hey, whatever you got.
Do we have any update on the language line contract?
Thank you. I was actually going to bring that up, and I forgot. So language translation, we absolutely recognize that there has been a decline in service for our constituents in the field with language translation for 911 calls. This is just a reality that has just all of a sudden become a big problem for us. I don't know. This is my opinion, but I think when the company that we had, it was Voyant Seracom, they were merged, they were bought by Propio. So the name of the company now is Propio. I think there may have been some internal issues that have resulted in service impacting difficulties. And so we've spoken with them, and we've talked with them because we have another year on that contract. So we do have a year to answer your question. That'll be one more year with them. We got them on the phone and put the fear of God into them. And essentially we just sent a letter out. We sent a branch notice out. I don't know if everyone in the room has seen that. But effectively, they've created a new process by which complaints are filed. We still want to hear about them at OES. Obviously, if you're having issues, we want to know. Nina Nand is the contract manager on that. Theo is her boss. They all roll up to me, so I hear about each of these issues that come through on language translation. We are working with the vendor to address them, to address the issues. They have created a new it's like a shared email address that all the way up to the VP of that company, they see the emails that come in from you. So they're taking it seriously, and because we used to have one guy. We had Bill Martin was it. He was our one guy. He was our contact at OES. We'd call him with every complaint we had. We'd yell at him. He'd get it fixed, or hopefully get it fixed. But we've reached a point now where that's not sufficient. So we've asked them to step up as a company and engage and help us to get this solved, or else. So they're working with us. They've shown a renewed commitment to getting these problems solved. But we do have that contract coming up in a year, and we will bid that. That is a competitively bid contract. It used to be Language Line, then it was Network Omni, and then we're at Voyance. And so, what's that? Yeah. Oh, yeah. No. Yeah. So who wins the next contract? I mean, obviously it's competitively bid. We'll see, but all these factors are taken into consideration, right, when they bid. So, to answer your question.
You guys are making me get my steps in.
Microphone already. With the new contract that comes out in June for the call handling solutions,
yes.
Will PSAPs be expected to receive a new allotment letter? Will we have to go through that process all again?
Great question, Mandy. Yes. So the allotment letters that you have in your possession, if you have not gone into contract with a vendor to buy a system, meaning you have an approval in hand from us, or something like that, you will have to get a new letter. Every allotment letter we issue is tied to that contract. So, and what I mean by that is that we generate the allotments based on contract value. So Elk Grove, you're what, 8 positions? 10? 12. Wow, coming up. So 12 positions, your allotment letter is directly tied to what a 12 position system costs on the current contract, which is different than the last one. So yeah, so you got to reapply for them. We will work with the team to try and make that simple so that perhaps we can just go through the list of ones we've issued and just start down the line and start reissuing them. In the past we haven't done that, but like I said, we're in a pretty big crunch to get systems out there, so we want to be a little bit more proactive than we normally would have been in the past.
Hi, Dave Jones here, and you don't have to go into weeds with it, but in regards to virtual or what do I want to say, data center operations, I haven't read your contracts, so I don't know. Is there any requirements for like geolocation security, cybersecurity, or operational security requirements?
Yes. Well, operational security we leave to the PSAP. That's, we don't tell you how to secure your building. You've already, that's we leave that to PSAP. Cybersecurity, yes. We generally follow the NIST framework, right, for our contracts for call handling. We have asked for any vendor who is cloud native, their cloud infrastructure has to be FedRAMP certified. So you got AWS, you got GovCloud, Azure. So we piggyback off of other standards, yes, but they're in there. Yeah. Any questions for Steve? I'm just kidding.
I got a couple questions, if I may.
Sure.
What does it look like for the equipment in the PSAPs with the new RFPs going out to the network providers? Is that staying the same, or is that going to be changed over?
Good question. So we will most likely have to do, I think we'll most likely have to do like a rip and replace. the fact of the matter is, a rack is a rack, right? It's just metal sitting there, but everything inside of that, we've talked about this. We've talked about repurposing. What can we keep? What can we not? But when you talk to specific vendors, they've all got their preferred partners. A vendor will come to you and say, "Well, that's a Cisco router. I need Juniper. I can't monitor that. I can't work with that." So we probably will be having depending on who wins, right? So if there's infrastructure that's in place that belongs to a vendor today, and they win the RFP going forward, then some of that equipment will obviously be reused. If not, the new vendor coming in will have to come in and deal with that. Now, an important distinction that I want to make, and this is going to be on the call handling RFP. I haven't told Steve yet, so don't tell him. But what we have coming out is that for cloud versus on-prem, I was talking about the call handling, cloud versus on-prem. We have different demarcation points for the call and different call anchoring points. And so what we're going to do is that and all the vendors know this, we're doing vendor discussions all this week. We're doing pre-solicitation market research work with them. So we've talked to them about this. So I'm not surprising any call handling vendors with this. But we intend to have the demarc for cloud call handling be in the cloud or at the data center, because that's where that call gets anchored. So if you as a PSAP elect to buy cloud or data center call handling, you won't have a need for a next-gen rack in your back room for the network rack, that network portion, if that makes sense, because that call, that transport's going to terminate from our next-gen core service to the cloud call handling, vendor, and then they are going to provide transport into you back and forth last mile. So that's going to it's going to simplify things. It's going to keep us from having that finger pointing issue that we were talking about, and it allows the vendors to have a little bit more control over their network. So the word of the day in the branch is simplify, right? And so that's what that does for us, and it takes one more rack out of your back room that you don't have to deal with. So we're very excited about that portion of it. For an on-prem system, you will still have to have that network demarc rack will still be present in there, and yes, there will have to be a changeover depending on who wins the bid.
Okay, thank you. And for Northern California, the Synergem departure, I understand they're the primary alley provider currently to the PSAPs. Is there going to be any interruptions to that, or how does that transition to the new vendor?
So alley will transition. We're still working through the details on that. We're still working through the details. That will transition. We've got a couple of plans that we've lined out that we are working through right now. Can't really comment on them here, but we definitely have taken into consideration, and we're trying. What our goal is to have as few transitions of alley as possible. We're going to have to do at least one, get you off of the Synergem provided alley, and it's still legacy alley, just for you guys so you know. That's still legacy alley. It's just being brought through a different pipe than what we used to have with AT&T and Frontier. But we do need to transition it, and we are working through that plan right now, and that'll be happening over the course of the next year as well. So,
thank you. And last question: the 23 PSAPs that have transitioned, are they still taking I3 calls, or are they going back to the legacy?
They're all still taking I3 calls. None of them have transitioned fully. So remember, I said we were going carrier by carrier. So none of those 23 are 100% I3. They've all still got some legacy calls coming in, but they will be sort of frozen in place, right? We're trying to stabilize, right? So we'll leave them where they're at in that process. Try to get them, high on the list for when we do start the new transition, right, and the new deployment. Obviously, they'll be a high priority, so we get them out of that blended state. Yeah. Mike's getting his steps in.
See what you can accomplish when you're chapter president?
Yeah.
So I may be swearing in church a little bit here. Large transitions between legacy and new stuff have been known to be catastrophically failed, and there's a whole list of those. What are your fallback plans just in case you get halfway into say, oops?
Anybody hiring? I'm kidding. No, that's a great question. I mean, I would say and Steve has said this at the advisory board, so I'm not saying anything out of turn here, but we don't get a strike three. You know, I understand the question, right? What is the plan? We have to get it right this time, right? We already went through that once, and so I think that speaks to the level of care and concern that we're applying to this go around that maybe wasn't present last time. I don't know, Steve, would you care to comment?
It is a good question, and it kind of ties in with, you know, a couple of the main themes from my part of the presentation, where we talked about, you know, network availability being one of the key, you know, requirements, and that includes during these transition phases. And so what you can expect is that we will design a strategy that has that safety net you're talking about, so that if we need to roll back to the previous version that was stable, we will have that available in the wings. So it'll be, you know, a period where when you're transitioned on to the new network, there's still this other one sitting here waiting just in case. So we aren't going to be, you know, flying without, you know, a parachute, so to speak. So that'll be part of the, I think, the transition design that we come up with. And, you know, as we're doing that, of course, and this ties in with the other points too, is we're always going to be engaging with the PSAP staff as we're doing this well in advance of the transition, and making sure that everybody's prepared and understands what's about to happen and what those contingencies are. So it shouldn't be a surprise to anybody. And, you know, one of my challenges to the team is to make sure that we're engaging with all of the stakeholders so that there aren't any questions or surprises. And that's the opportunity to really make sure that everybody's comfortable with what the plan and the contingencies are before we start actually turning things off or turning things on. We want to make sure we have a solid plan and everybody's comfortable with what that transition looks like. So I hope that helps to address the question.
Well, and if I can add, from a technology standpoint, what we are embarking on is something that has been proven and done, not at a state as large as ours, because there are none for 911 purposes, but has been done by multiple states and proven successful. There are several states that have been on NextGen for a couple of years now. So we're following that model now rather than blazing a new trail. So hopefully that helps to be able to, you know, minimize the risk of that sort of catastrophic failure.
Is there, I don't remember if this was talked about at the last coordinator meeting or not, but is there a timeline for when we should expect to be notified for the rack swap, or any kind of, like, what the next movement will be?
Yeah. So that'll all come with contract award, right? So there will be some. We think there's going to be some rack swaps in the near future. The 23 PSAPs that are live, all of their transfer partners, they'll all have to have their racks changed out so that we have that continuity of operation that I was talking about with Atos. So those folks will have to be done right away. So if you're one of those, you're going to get a new rack. There are a couple of other considerations that we have to make when we do start to make this transition that will require rack changes. But by and large, most of the PSAPs in the state, you're not going to get notified until we've signed these contracts, we've developed our project plan, and we're kind of, you know, embarking down that path. So I'm thinking fall-ish was when we're really going to start developing those dates and those timelines and those plans. Yeah. That's it?
Of course.
Hi, Steve mentioned moving to a dual carrier strategy. I was curious, is that going to be sort of a monolithic win for the primary carrier, or is that, you know, two carriers running, is it like a hot swap, standby, or is it concurrent supporting of the NextGen network?
So we're in those discussions right now as to what level of engagement that backup vendor has on a daily basis, right? Do we give them 10% of the calls and make sure that it's constantly trickling through, and they're, some calls are being delivered so that it's not a hot standby, it's an actual active, backup, or does it sit cold and we have them standing there as a hot standby? Engineering's talking through that, right? We do have some considerations that we have to take into account. And I don't want to get too far into the weeds, but where does your backup sit, and what does it back up is a big question, right? So in the 911 network, you've got the central offices, or the mobile switching centers, then you've got the aggregation points, then you've got the selective routers, and you've got all these different stations that you want that redundancy and resiliency in. We need the carriers to provide some of that, and then we, as the next gen provider, the 911 network provider, have to put our demarc in and say, okay, where are we going to have this backup sit? And the further you go back in steps to the caller, the more expensive it gets, right? And the harder it gets to back up, right? So those questions are being run through right now. As Steve said, the RFP, and as I said, the RFP is still being developed. We are talking about that. Don't only have an answer for you today, but it's absolutely a top consideration of how we want that to lay out. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Along the line of his question there, sorry, I don't know as much about the NG911 system, but does that mean it's not possible for it to be like an A or B option, and that if you pick A, B's the backup, and if you pick B, A's the backup?
So I think I know what you're saying. We can do different flavors of backup. Yeah. So we can have them sit as a hot swap, right, or a hot standby, I should say. But it has to be, if we take that route, it has to sit at a certain point, right? We'll call it a core-to-core failover, right? So if we want a core-to-core failover where you have one vendor sitting there as A and the next one is B behind it, that's very easy to do, right? It's something that if vendor A is delivering a call, their core fails, that's an easy swap over. If you want to fail over at aggregation, it gets a lot more tricky because there's all the ingress points from the network come into these. And so when we award contract, the intent is to say, you're A and you're B. You're the primary, you're the backup. That's the intent. So if that's what you're asking, that's what we're going to do. We're gonna name one as the primary and one as the backup, and then we'll have the ability, if that primary vendor can't carry the water, we'll have that other vendor behind them. So,
I guess to better clarify my question, is the scenario that I described not possible, or B, if it's maybe it is possible, just unrealistic, it would be too expensive. It's based on other constraints.
Yeah, to have two.
Without going into too much technical detail.
Yeah, there's a lot in that. That's a very loaded question, but basically to have two standalone 911 networks it would cost more money than we have. It'd be frankly impossible. So we do have to find a point where the backup is inserted into that network, but to have two independent 911 networks, it's not really feasible.
So just to add to that, I think it sounds like one of the meanings of what you're asking is like, is there a way of having it not be like where there's a choice, basically? And in order to do that, it kind of starts to increase the amount of administrative overhead that would be required that doesn't really add a lot of value. And so while it is technically possible to do what you're describing, where you have, you could do it, county by county or whatever, but the practical issue with that is that it does then add cost and complexity to managing it, that I wouldn't want to introduce that if we didn't have to. And so I think, that the heart of the question is there is, this possibilities, but what I really want to emphasize is that we're creating a scenario where we have, you know, a system that's running, and if there's a problem with it, then we have a place we can go in short order, because I don't want downtime during the transition. So when we start talking about, is it a hot standby or is it, you know, taking traffic all the while? The main thing I want to emphasize there is that if we have to go from A to B, it has to be fast and seamless. So I think it kind of addresses both points there. But
to speak kind of holistically to 911, historically, there's a reason 911 transport is regulated by the Public Utilities Commission, because it's essentially a public utility. So one of the ways we look at it, you know, your water, you turn it on, it just comes on, and you get a bill from your water supplier. You don't get to choose who supplies your water. You just get it, and you get the bill, and the rates are, you know, negotiated by the PUC. So 911 exists in that space. So, you know, we are treading into new territory with contracts. We've never done contracts before. 911 has always been delivered by your LEC, by AT&T or Verizon back in the day, Frontier now, and that's been it. So, you know, to Steve's point, we want the technological capability of delivering a call if one carrier fails, but realistically, you know, that obligation, that regulatory obligation of being a utility rests on their shoulders too. Right, and so today you'll see an AT&T outage, you'll see a Frontier outage, but as they understand that they've got the PUC looking at them, they got the FCC looking at them, they got our office looking at them, so they react to fix that and make sure that downtime is minimal. We'll be able to be in an environment where we can minimize that with a backup vendor, but that choice, I guess, is probably, like Steve said, is probably not necessarily an option.
Any other questions?
All right, thank you.
Great. Steve, Andrew, thank you very much for coming.
Yeah.
And thank you for your presentation.
Yeah, thank you for having us. It was a pleasure to be here.
And with that, just a reminder, February 12th in Roseville is the next chapter meeting. And since this is really your meeting, the board of directors is just here to facilitate. So if there is a topic that you would like us to present at a future meeting, please reach out to us and let us know, and we'll be more than happy to contact individuals and make arrangements for that to happen. Frequency coordination will be at 1 o'clock over on this side. Operations, we'll have your meeting over here on this other side. And lunch is ready. Thank you all for coming. We'll see you next month.